Shalom Aleichem, Mishpachim. I am coming to you with the third Torah reading of the Onkelos on the Torah. If you don't know, Onkelos lived somewhat a couple thousand years ago, and he was actually a Roman soldier, a non-Jew, and he converted to Judaism. And he began to learn, and he translated. He translated the Torah into Aramaic, and Onkelos, his translation, his commentary actually, is a very authoritative commentary within Judaism. So yeah, many Jewish people read Onkelos weekly and follow along. All right, I will begin. We are in the third Torah reading portion of Vayishlach, and let us begin in Genesis, Bereishit, and let us begin. All right, we are starting with chapter 32, verse 31. Onkelos down here, Torah up here. Let us begin. Jacob called the name of a place Peniel, for I have seen an angel of the Lord face to face, and yet my life has been preserved. All right, let's see what Onkelos says. Verse 31. Onkelos. All right, here it is. Angel of the Lord. So he has seen an angel of the Lord face to face. In Scripture, Jacob states that he saw Elohim, God, in this dream. Our Targumists and the Sadiagon substitute angel of the Lord so as to reduce the impact of the anthropomorphism. Neither addresses Maimonides' concern. See appendix, that one cannot see an angel. It is unlikely that Onkelos felt that it is possible to visualize angels, given the Targumists' consistent elimination of anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism, yeah. It is likely that either he was unconcerned in this case because this was a dream, and one can see otherwise. Impossible visions in a dream, or he felt he could not remove every anthropomorphism from his translation without transforming his translation into an unrecognizable tract. All right, and verse 32, Torah. The sun rose on him as he passed Penuel, and he was limping on his hip. Verse 32. There is no 32, but I'd like to read chapter 32 here and read the Onkelos highlights. What we just finished, chapter 32. Did we just finish? Yeah, finishing chapter 32. All right, I'll read this. Should we believe in the existence of angels? If they exist, do they interact with humans? There is no clear-cut answer to this issue, which is frequently discussed as a relevant topic in Bible studies. While some answer yes to both questions, others suggest that biblical references to angels always come within a context of dreams. There are researchers who maintain that our Targumist wrote his translation, among other reasons, to teach theological lessons, such as the existence of angels. However, a careful reading of the Aramaic text reveals that this is not true. In chapter 32, verse 2, for example, our Targumist renders scriptures malachim as angels, but does not clarify whether the noun should be understood as a heavenly being or as a metaphor. Even though one view in Genesis Rabbah maintains that Jacob sent heavenly angels to his brother Esau in chapter 32, verse 4, in our portion of Vayishlach, our Targumist and many early and medieval Bible commentators render malachim as messengers. And we'll continue with beyond the text. In chapter 32, Jacob's dreaded, anticipated confrontation with his brother Esau is described. Note Jacob's threefold preparation. He prays, appeases, and yet prepares for war. Our sages have generally lauded Jacob for his behavior. After God's promise of protection, wouldn't prayer have been enough? Doesn't appeasement demonstrate weakness and just encourage aggressors? Was Jacob really ready to battle Esau and his 400 men? One of the Bible's most famous narratives is found in chapter 32, the struggle of Jacob with a stranger. It is unclear whether the stranger was a human, an angel, or part of a dream. The verse identifies the opponent as a man. Who do you think was the opponent? What do you believe is the meaning of the encounter? Could it have been a dream? If so, what caused the dream? Is it possible that Jacob's conscience was bothering him because, just before meeting his brother Esau, he recalled how he obtained Isaac's blessing by trickery in chapters 25 and 27 of Bereishit? Could the inner struggle be an expression of his fear of the forthcoming encounter with his brother? What is the meaning of the exchange between Jacob and the stranger concerning names? Why do names play such a prominent role in the Bible? Do names reflect the nature of one's personality or influence character development? The Jewish people have three names: Hebrews, Israelites, and Jews, each used in different periods of history. Each name carries a spiritual connotation. Can you suggest what they are? The Jewish homeland was almost always identified as the land of Israel. Why? Why was this? Jews do not eat the sinew that is upon the hip socket to this day. Is the remembrance of a historical event or dream in this fashion a rational law? Or since eating one type of food and avoiding another type, unless for hygienic purposes, is simply a ritual, it belongs to the category which is popularly called a chak, an inexplicable statute that must be obeyed because it emanates from God. Is there a difference in terms of Jewish commitment? All right, so there is no commentary for 32 and 33 with Onkelos. All right, verse 33, Torah. Therefore, the children of Israel do not eat the sinew that is upon the hip socket to this day, for he touched Jacob's hip socket on the sinew. Chapter 33, verse 1. Jacob raised his eyes and saw, behold, Esau was coming with 400 men. So he divided his children among Leah, Rachel, and his two concubines. Verse 1, Onkelos, 400 men, concubines. Onkelos elevates the biblical maidservants to enhance the honor of the mothers of Jacob's children, here in verses 2 and 6 and in prior chapters. Verse 2, Torah. He placed the concubines and their children first, and Leah and her children afterwards, and Rachel and Joseph afterwards. Verse 2, Onkelos. Jacob placed his family with those he most loved more in the rear, Rashi and Radak. The placement allowed the rear echelon to escape if the family in front was attacked. Verse 3, Torah. He went before them and bowed down to the ground 7 times until he reached his brother. Verse 3, Onkelos, 7 times. Genesis, Rabbah, cites in Proverbs, chapter 24, verse 16. A just man falls 7 times and rises up again. And this is talking about how a righteous man falls 7 times, where it says, but it uses the word just here, which is definitely comparable. So, verse 4, Torah. Esau ran to him and embraced him. He fell on his neck and he kissed him, and they wept. Verse 4, Onkelos. And he kissed him. The tragic conflict between Jacob and Esau began when Jacob deceitfully kissed his father, and ends ironically with the erstwhile enemy Esau kissing him with apparent sincerity. But the Masoretes, who flourished in the first millennium of the Common Era, placed a dot on each letter of the Hebrew, and he kissed him. Their intent for doing so is obscure. The Midrash Sifrei, quoted by Rashi, has 2 views. One is that Esau kissed Jacob without affection. 2 is, while he hated Jacob, Esau's affection was altered on this occasion, and he kissed Jacob with brotherly love. In Genesis, Rabbah, quoted by Radak, relates that the dots inform us that Esau meant to bite Jacob, but a miracle occurred. A miracle occurred that transformed Jacob's neck into protective marble. Ibn Ezra rejects the fanciful negative interpretation, stating that it is obvious that Esau kissed Jacob with heartfelt affection. For the verse itself concludes, and they wept. Our Targumist renders the word literally. Verse 5. Torah, he raised his eyes and saw the women and the children. He said, who are these to you? And he said, the children whom the Lord has graciously given to your servant. Verse 5, Unclos. Lord, who the Lord has given to your servant. I believe this is how it's being translated. I think, I'm not sure why it says Bible. I'll have to read the introduction to see why. This reoccurs in verse 11, given to your servant. Jacob was asked about the women and children, but only responded concerning the children because this was a moral issue. One does not talk about one's wife. Nachmanides, Ramban. All right. And that is the third reading, third aliyah of Vayishlach. With Onkelos translation or commentary. All right. I am reading from my Wisdom Sefer from the Lubavitcher Rebbe on each parshiot. It is separated individually by each aliyah, meaning into 7 readings. Each Torah portion is separated into 7 readings, just like on Shabbat in synagogue. When the reader reading the Torah scroll is reading, there's 7 separate readings, and this is what it is. This is why it's doing this, 7 readings. So this is the third. What I just read was chapter 32, verse 31 through chapter 33, verse 5. All right. Since Esau's guardian angel dislocated Jacob's hip joint when they were wrestling, the Torah prohibits the Jewish people from eating the nerve of the hip joint, even of kosher animals. The title of this wisdom on the parshiot is called Celebrating God's Protection. Therefore, the Israelites do not eat the nerve of the hip joint. The purpose of this prohibition is not just to commemorate the fact that Esau's guardian angel dislocated Jacob's hip joint, but to remember the entire story of the struggle with this angel and how God miraculously rescued Jacob from him. The reason we commemorate this miracle in particular is because it expresses God's promise of our survival throughout history. By rescuing Jacob from the power of Esau, God was telling Jacob's descendants, the Jewish people, that despite all the persecutions they would later suffer throughout their various exiles at the hands of the oppressing nations, they would never be destroyed. It is significant that we commemorate this episode by recalling a seemingly minor detail of it. What happened to Jacob's hip? By doing so, we celebrate how God's love and commitment to Jewish survival extends to every detail of our existence, even seemingly minor ones. All right, and that is the reading of the third portion of this Sefer of wisdom from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And all these teachings on wisdom related to the parshiot in here, in this book, is from the mouth of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. All right. Laila Tov. Have a wonderful night.